So, hello and welcome. My name is Lucy, and I'm here today to talk to Professor Peter Kawalek around a topic that is very, very close to my heart. We're joining forces here from Inclusive Change at Work and Digital Safety. We're both community interest companies, and we very much want to talk about digital well-being for young people. So, Peter, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
My pleasure. Good to be here. And thank you, Lucy.
Great. Right. I have got some questions to ask you. Now, we've been working together for quite a while, so I kind of have an idea of how you feel about this topic, but many of the people out there who might be watching this video, hopefully there's loads of people, will probably not have an idea about where we're coming from and what this means to us. So I'm going to delve into a few questions. To put a bit of context, we're actually going to be talking about digital well-being and particularly digital well-being for young people. This is related to a conference that both of us are going to be speaking at in Bristol on the 25th of April in 2024 down in Lee Court. I'll give you more information about where you can find out more stuff to book later on. But Peter, first of all, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your role with digital safety?
Yeah, so I'm Professor and Director of the Centre for Information Management at Loughborough University. That's in the Loughborough Business School. And a few years ago, digital safety arrived on my doorstep with a query about a student project. And it kind of blew us away, actually, really, because they were talking about digital safety, which sounds maybe a little bit dry, and people might question what's meant by that, but they would talk about it in a very fresh and new way, and something that was actually, hugely socially relevant, and also a little bit scary because they were talking about it in a bigger way than we'd seen before. Well, we engaged with a student project, and the rest is kind of history, really, because the student project exposed to us the kind of world of vulnerabilities that is much greater than is generally acknowledged, much more consequential than is generally acknowledged. And then as the kind of Centre for Information Management at Loughborough, we had the choice, do we join in with this, engage with this, yes or no? And we're very committed to a kind of an agenda which we call progress with purpose. So we very much got on board with this and have sought to develop it ever since. So my own personal engagement with digital safety has grown and grown to the extent where I know, I know I've got to know the northeast of the country very well, which is a beautiful thing, and so on. But actually, even this week is quite significant because we've had meetings about an MOU with the company, with the KIC, and between the university and the Digital Safety Community Interest Company. And so we're kind of at the point of history now as well, because we're looking forward to many years of collaboration ahead.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. Yeah. Let me just take you back a little bit, because you mentioned the student project talking about vulnerabilities and perhaps vulnerabilities that weren't ones that you'd noticed or considered before. How did that manifest itself? What did that look like? What were those vulnerabilities?
Yeah, because it's quite interesting, because I think at sometimes in history, people would have described me personally as a kind of tech optimist, a professor who'd stand up in the classroom and talk about the benefits of tech. But and associated with that was always the kind of inclusion agenda. And the inclusion agenda was, in a sense, getting people the rights of access, getting them online, getting them the kit, the equipment, and the know-how to become part of a kind of a digitalizing world. But what we began to see with the digital safety work was the incredible downside of that actually sometimes, for some people, we were leading them into situations of vulnerability. And that vulnerability was being willfully and hugely exploited by people who were only too happy to do so, if I put it like that.
Yeah.
And we're talking about everything from kind of fraud which would be a very common thing, to maybe abuse by individuals, including forms of bullying. And it was eye-opening. And then once your eyes are open, you begin to see a lot of the world in a new way. You begin to see that actually there are no hard edges around this. There is no one group that you can point to and say that they are vulnerable and they are not.
Yeah.
But what you begin to see is vulnerability expressed across society. And in particular, we live on a campus among young people, in particular among young people themselves, who, after all, are highly social, engaging with each other, and major tech users. And then the questions follow.
Yeah. I've been reading recently, well, I do audiobooks, so I listen to them a lot when I'm traveling and around. And Tim Elmore is an author who writes about generational diversity in the workplace.
Yes.
And at the moment, I'm listening to exactly that, the different ways in generations engage with technology or engage with tech in the workplace. And Generation Z, so that the generation you're talking about who are on campus at the moment, they're the ones who are highly tech enabled and engaged, but actually there are things that are not quite working so well, and they're not quite as engaged in other aspects of their world. And we think that the tech has been bright and great and good. Somehow we've kind of gotten to a place where it's not so bright and great and good.
Yes, I agree. So I think something that surfaces, again, speaking from a kind of business school perspective, is the business model of the tech companies.
Yeah.
The business model of the tech companies depends upon high levels of attention, people being online. Yeah.
I'm there.
Yeah, absolutely. People being online in a way more than they know and realize.
Yeah.
So building the habit of attention to the point at which the advertising models of the major platforms can spin and spin and spin and spin. And I think that it's probably surprising to people just how much revenue and scale, in a sense, is associated with that world. So, we are talking about hundreds of billions of US dollars per annum for single US companies, not even for the industry, but for single companies, hundreds of billions of dollars. And so you kind of come at it and you say, well, if they've got that much interest in people attending to say social media and to the use of a smartphone in general, would they get good at it? Would they get good at it? And is there something in that business model that, in a sense, has maybe overstepped a line of what is socially conducive for people? And I think that becomes a major area of inquiry when you begin to talk about some of the downsides that seem to be prevalent in many, or even to some extent all, social groups.
So I'm just going to delve a little bit into the business model and into the business school element you just mentioned. And so I meet a lot of people who are at work and they have to use their personal phones for work.
Yes.
They're expected to be online. They're expected to answer emails. They're expected to check social media or groups or WhatsApps. How does that sit with business in general? So companies who are asking their employees to do that, how do you think that plays out for the mental health of people in work?
Well, that's where we come to the kind of well-being agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Now, well-being is a kind of term that's maybe not people kind of intuitively understand it, but maybe don't really know the science behind it. So the first thing I would say is you're completely correct, Lucy, to identify these structural forces, in a sense, the cultural expectation that comes from the workplace. And at the end of the day, the workplace is paying your mortgage. So you're under some pressure, it's paying for your family, it's paying for your life, it's paying for your mortgage. So you're under some pressure. So that cultural pressure begins to eke into people's lives. that begins to take its own route and to kind of manifest in different ways. And so the first way in which you could talk about the well-being agenda is to say that it's kind of the social response to that. It's basically saying, hey guys, hey workplace, you've invaded my space.
Mm-hmm.
So now you've got to take some responsibility back. You've invaded, you've gone over that 9 to 5 line. You've gone into my home life. So now my home life is going to speak back to you and is going to say, actually, I'm hurting or we're hurting, something is going wrong. We need you to take greater care over the overall well-being of, say, me as an employee and my family. And so the first way of understanding the well-being agenda is to see it as a response to that eking away of that home life balance, and let's be honest, I think most of us, we can just see it from looking upwards to our parents or even some cases older siblings, etc. And it's changed hugely. It's changed hugely.
My approach has changed hugely. I can remember probably 30 years ago, my husband, we're still together now, believe it or not. He would always be on his computer. He'd be like, oh, I want to go and play this, or I want to go and do this, and I want to find out this. This was when dial-up was in fashion. This was way before the internet. And I used to get really frustrated and like, just no, let's do something else. Let's do something else. Now I will put my hands up and say, I'm scrolling. I'm on tech every day, every night, when actually we probably should be doing some other stuff.
Well, I think again a number of points there, but part of that relates to young people as well, because you say, Lucy, should be doing other stuff, and you're right, probably. You're probably right. And that brings in tasks, the tasks that we do, and the task substitution thesis that affects young people. If you think about adolescence, going back to adolescence, if you think about adolescence, then there are certain tasks that have generally been associated with shepherding oneself through a healthy adolescence.
Yeah.
Little social groupings, self-selecting groups, activities, sports, whatever, time away from the class with smaller groupings and so on and so forth, that have kind of been anthropologically, ritualistically associated with what it takes to make that healthy crossing from childhood into adulthood.
Yeah.
And doing the wrong tasks in that space is potentially even more consequential than it is for you or me at home, with with mature brains, with mature emotional systems. So if you or I can get, in a sense, duped,
then it's for young people whose brains are still in that formation stage. Adolescence now, for me, I see adolescence doesn't finish until we're about 25 now.
Yeah, that's part of the thesis.
Yeah. In that our adolescence is extended, and we think 18 because traditionally, sociologically, anthropologically, I can't even think of what other words to use there, but culturally 18 and maybe 21 are considered, you used to get the keys to the door at 21, didn't you? In my family, my aunties actually had like the key to the door, and you'd get this old-fashioned, like, you can probably still get them in gift shops now. That's what we expect. Is that, oh, well, you're 18 now, you're an adult now. Oh, you're 21 now, off you go. But we're still forming those brains. But those brains are still working out how to be an adult up until that later age. And if we're exposing ourselves, and if we're exposing young people to the things that are not the good tasks and good activities, what are we doing?
Yeah, exactly right. So basically, your prefrontal cortex, your kind of which maps you, if you like, into your environment, is basically completing its development around about the age of 25. So in a sense, the environment is helping to teach your brain how to behave up until that age point, and even beyond, because of neuroplasticity. But basically, we can take 25 as a kind of, in some ways, a marker. Gently take 25 as some ways a marker, and say that up until that point, your experiences, however they are encountered in your childhood, in your family, on the web, on the dark web, or wherever, are going to teach your brain about the
How to
world
behave.
and how
Yeah.
to behave in that world.
And
And
how to
that's
react, isn't it?
exactly, yeah.
I think I mean there's work around VR and things like that, and I've spoken to psychologists and neuroscientists before around the memories that we form in our brain, even if it's something that happens to us online, will impact us and does
Yeah.
give us that response to trauma or to activities, because our I'm going to go all posh now. I'm going to go all fancy words. Our hippocampus remembers that stuff. And so when we pull the filing cabinet out of our hippocampus, which is that part of the brain that helps us remember and recall stuff, it remembers it in a way that actually this happened and it was real, but actually it could have been
Yes.
in VR.
Yes, yes. And so as we've got more and more sophisticated media screens, and VR being the next iteration, then effectively we've got at least we can hypothesize about a more traumatizing set of experiences gained artificially through the web.
Wow. I didn't expect us to get that deep so quickly there, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you. I mean, it's literally, it blows my mind because I think about and talk about these things mostly every day. I have a bit of a thesis or a hypothesis, whatever we want to call it. I get my words mixed up. That if we don't consider the mental health and the impact of digital well-being in our younger generations, it's going to have a big impact for employment. It's going to have an impact on recruitment, retention, and employers who will need to who will be reacting to the impact of higher anxiety, resilience issues, young people who are coming into the workplace who have a different way of operating and don't quite yet match and fit into the world of work as it is. What would you say about that?
Yes, is what I would say. I'd say yes. But then I would follow by saying it's kind of us. It's kind of us, the employers in our generation, who have, in a sense, created this issue. You know, the one
Yeah.
thing I will not, and I know you wouldn't either, but I will not side on that kind of idea of a kind of a generation that's too sensitive or
No,
not resilient
no,
enough, and so on and so
they're
forth.
actually, I'd say they're
Yeah,
no different to you and I. They're no different to
yeah.
other generations, but we have an environment and we
But we
have
can,
conditions that have
yeah,
led us to a point.
yeah. So it's our generation that, in a sense, have let loose this tech.
Yeah.
We might personally, as individuals, feel we didn't
Wow.
have much stake in that.
Yeah.
But we've let loose this tech. We've let loose a whole series of social changes, and our young people are our manifestation of that, our greatest manifestation of our work, if you like. And
Whew.
so, if there are issues, it's down
Our
to us.
generation.
Yeah.
I'm feeling the bit of weight of that actually.
Mm.
That actually, and I think that's why we're passionate about this, and that's why we want to do something,
Yeah.
because we have recognized this, and we can see that actually we do have a responsibility, and it's certainly not the fault of younger people that
Yeah.
this is happening. They haven't made this, and yeah.
Yeah. As we say, a kind of crisis, but not of their making.
You
It's
literally took the words out of my mouth. I stopped myself saying it because I thought I'm going to get you to say, I'm going to lead
yeah,
that into you. So this idea of a crisis, but not of their making, this is what you're going to be speaking about at the Castle Conference in
yes,
April over at Lee Court in Bristol, 25th of April. It's a conference which is called the Castle Conference, and it's all about digital wellbeing in young people. And Peter, you have kindly stepped up to the mark, and we're going to be talking about that particular topic. So, a crisis, but not of their making. What does that what does that mean, and what will you be talking about at the conference?
well, it's to explore really the research, and what the research is saying, the formal academic research, what's that saying about teenage adolescent mental health, and the possible impacts of social media and the kind of digital technology suite. And also to situate that against the business models and the way in which the tech companies, which are by and large the most valuable companies this planet has ever seen.
Oh my God, they're more. Do they not have more than a country? Some
Absolutely,
countries.
absolutely. I mean, it's a kind of another question, but there's a kind of whole point about corporates now, and especially the tech companies, being in a sense higher in research revenue than national budgets.
Wow.
It's a
Wow.
colossal power shift, and so in a sense we take the mental health crisis and the available evidence around it, and we contrast that, and we ask questions of the business models of tech companies which depend upon the attention of individuals, including the most vulnerable individuals in society. And within that set, we might well include adolescents, and actually pre-adolescents too,
Yeah.
and the use of tools. And we ask sensible questions, and we come up with sensible, balanced judgments about what's happening and what the risks are.
Amazing. I mean, I don't want to go into too much detail because I want people to come to the conference and find out about it at the conference. But it is an incredibly important topic, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think that we can kind of make, we can probably start with professionals, and we can maybe tell anecdotes about how professionals at the cutting edge in social care settings and education and elsewhere are reporting upon this issue. And if we listen to their voices, it's frightening.
Yeah.
And actually,
They're
if you listen,
frightened.
and it's frightening, and many of them are frightened, and hard pressed with it. And if we talk to many parents will observe that something has gotten out of control, and there is no toolkit coming down from their parents to help them cope with it. It's
Afraid
something
not.
new.
It's got to come from us.
New.
It's going to come from people like you and I and others who feel strongly about this and feel that they can influence. I think one of those things that would be great, and one of the outputs and impacts that we want from the conference is to influence and create influence in areas where that change can happen.
Yes, absolutely right. Absolutely right. So I think that's a kind of general stepping up of our kind of, in a way, our communities. I know it sounds old-fashioned in a way to talk about
No, I think that's what it's got to come back to.
capability, but it really is key, because we've got these business models of these gargantuan companies outside there. There has to be some series of mechanisms and institutional responses and communal responses that asks them the right questions, to justify their great status and wealth. And I think community responses are absolutely a key part of that.
What would you say about so some of some calls have been made for under 16s use of social media to be either regulated or even banned? What would you say about that?
Yeah, so there's no easy street here. That's the issue. There is no easy street, no easy response. And so we can talk about regulation, and we can definitely take it seriously, and it might be a contribution, because much of society will respond to it. Much of society will respond to it at some cost for our traditional understanding of how a democratic society works. And so if we are making, in a sense, some adjustments, we might call some sacrifice on behalf of bringing greater regulation into our lives. Again, we need to ask questions about, why have we done this? What have we gained? And in a sense, who's winning out of this system whereby we are now regulating within the home, for example? It's a big step. It's a big and difficult step. We're now regulating within the home about the use of personal consumer devices. It's a big step.
It's
and
a big.
Who's winning? Who's winning here? So on the point of regulation, I'd say definitely it's a conversation to be had. Definitely there's potential there, but it's not an easy street, and it's not a comfortable street either.
No,
not at all.
I use the phrase "the genie's out of the bottle." And so how we if we can put it back in the bottle, I very, very much doubt it. But can we support families, parents, carers, support professionals to make choices about how we use digital technologies and how we support young people to make use of those digital technologies?
See, I absolutely love that, Lucy. I love the way you phrase that, because it does come down, and I know it sounds a little bit nebulous, but it does come down to support, to capability, to communities, to people, and their ability to make judgments about something, to know about certain things,
Yeah.
and to respond to them. And we are not going to get away with this without building that kind of community capability.
I think the word community has come up quite a lot
Mm.
now, and I'm a very strong proponent for community is the way that we take action. But we sometimes there's a whole layer of different things going on in that. Do we have those communities? Are we engaging those communities? Are we part of those communities?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. It's a kind of almost a response mechanism now that we have, because quite interesting when you think about it, that the data, if we talk
Yes.
about the data for a moment,
Yeah.
the data that is kind of the source of value for these companies, if you think about what that is, it is actually a representation of us and our communities.
Absolutely.
If you think
It's
about it,
telling it tells them everything, doesn't it? Where we shop, what we do, and they then use that to make more money.
yeah, and it tells them who my friends are. It
Mm-hmm.
tells them who I went to school with.
Mm-hmm.
So, the community is involved whether we like it or not.
Wow.
And a community level response comes from the way in which the business model of the tech firms has been constructed. So we're not going to get away, we're not going to advance ourselves through this difficult street without
Community.
focusing on community, because it's already there. It's a one-sided situation
Oh,
at the moment.
you've blown my mind again, Peter. My
Yeah.
facial expressions as you're talking are like, oh, yes, yes.
No, you said it so succinctly, Lucy. Yeah.
Okay, so I think this will be the last one, and I was going to bring in the Online Safety Act. So in the
Yeah.
UK, we've got the Online Safety Act, which came into power very, very recently. We're in 2024 now. If you're watching this at a later stage in life, in the future, it came into power fairly recently. What do you think that will do in terms of helping not solve this problem, but what will it do in terms of how social media operates and is regulated for under 16s, perhaps?
Yes. So you kind of can't say no and you can't say yes in a simple way, unfortunately. You can definitely say something has to be done and legislation has a role. But we have now this notion of harm
Yeah,
inscribed into law. And in some ways, it's a kind of an intelligent response, because the good thing about it is it puts pressure on the platforms. It puts pressure on the platforms to take account of the nature of the content, because they've had this incredibly easy situation whereby they basically said, "Oh, we're not
oh, it's
publishing.
nothing to do with
Yeah,
us.
nothing to do with us.
Yeah,
Everybody's self-publishing." And that's
yeah.
been the legislative settlement behind the web as we've seen it grow. And probably I'm not too overstating it if I say it's been a disaster, or it's had
Yep.
disastrous consequences, certainly.
Yeah. There
So
have
I'd
been.
say
Yeah.
definitely legislation. We have to look at that, and it's part of the picture. Is this the right legislation? Much more difficult, because that definition of harm, which is in some ways, or that concept of harm, which is in some ways positive and puts pressure on the tech platforms, also invites in another set of conversations about what people should be allowed to see and not allowed to see.
Yeah.
And hence, various groups are deeply, deeply concerned about it, because it's introducing governmental control into the
Censorship.
front
Yep.
room,
Yep.
basically. And you say, again, you sort of have to step back and say, when did we sign up for this and why? When did we sign up for this and why? And what actually have we gained from these tools?
It comes back to that, a crisis, but not of our making.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so legislation, in simple terms, it's definitely part of the picture. Definitely we have to look at it. There are some good things about the Act, but there are also very deep and difficult questions. And again, we need to be informed and to be thinking about these things, because suddenly there are bodies, Ofcom, who are required to state what is harmful on our behalf in relation to our houses and front rooms. It's a big change.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm going to wrap up a little bit now, I think. I'm going to say thank you. Is there anything else that you wanted to say at this point before we finish?
Well, it's great, Lucy, and I think that the first Castle conference, which I was privileged to be involved in, was a great event, hugely memorable, and very powerful. And I met person after person who just invited some kind of, I just felt humble listening to the work that they do.
The stories,
the stories of what they're involved in from the kind of sharp end of practice. And if we as academics can come in and talk about the balance of evidence, about the research, where it's going to, the questions it invokes, such as I've talked about today, then I think we'll be very happy to be there again in what I think will be possibly an even better event.
I think it's going to be good. It's definitely going to be good. No, thank you so much. I'm privileged to be able to have this conversation with you, and you and I have spoken many times around this topic, but absolutely privileged to be able to have this conversation. And some of the things we've just talked about, I think, will resonate with many people. And I hope if people have been watching and listening, get in touch with us, find out more about what we're doing, just drop us a message, and we'll be more than happy to carry on that conversation in various different ways. Thank you so much. If you want more information about our conference, then go to icaw-cic.com. That's ICAW or icaw-cic.com. You will find information right there on the front page about our conference, which is on the 25th of April in 2024 at Lee Court in Bristol. And delegate tickets are just £9. That means it's truly accessible. You even get a free lunch for that. But the thing is, we want to make this accessible. By having this conversation with Professor Peter Kawalek, you will have seen and heard that we want to make this accessible. This is a conference for many people. It isn't just about being able to afford to come to this kind of thing. We need to have these conversations. We need to expose this discussion and take it further. So join us on April the 25th at the Castle Conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucy.